All right, welcome everyone. I'm here with my good friend that it's been long overdue since we've done a review stream. I think the last time I mentioned it was, about under a year and a half ago, which was after both of us had top eight the Eternal Weekend 2021 event in November of that year. And Joerg Heinrich himself, Aaron Relentless on MTGO, actually won the Bayou event, finishing first place. And I think that's probably the most happy I've ever been for another Magic player in terms of results. So without further introduction, and here is my good friend and long time. He's taken a little bit of a break and he's had some nice personal developments in his life. But I'd like to introduce and welcome to back to the stream, Jörg. So do you want a little bit? Do you want to talk a little bit about your how you've been doing, and maybe we can dive right into the deck list because I'm sure people will care about that.
Yeah, thank you. So first, thanks for the invite, Newton. So as you mentioned, it's a while ago since we had a good reason to do the tournament recap. So yeah, lately I was focusing a bit more about real life stuff. So I played a lot of MTGO in the last years, and not really, was not that satisfied with the things around my real life things. Yeah, and that's what was a good time to do a break of playing competitive uh, events on MTGO. And in the meantime, I just met a woman, and yeah, now we are a good couple, I would say, since about like 2 months. And yeah, it's very good to have different things in life as well. And now I was a bit sick in the last days, so I had a good way to um, think about Magic and Legacy again, and was able to play a Saturday challenge again. And yeah, yesterday I successfully top 8'd first, and then also won the tournament.
Yeah. For those who don't know, we're doing the review stream. Partially, it's long overdue, but you won yesterday's challenge. I believe this is your first challenge win after I think three or four second place challenge results. So big congratulations. And obviously, for those who don't know, Jurg had been playing for a long time the Reclaimer Glimpse version, and then he won the trophy race with the traditional combo build with Nettle Sentinel instead of Reclaimer. Do you want to talk a little bit about why recently you went back to Elvish Reclaimer, which I'm happy to see by the way because from my observation you've had the best results with it um, because there was obviously Eternal Weekend and I think you had a run last year where you top eighted like 8 challenges or 7 out of 8 challenges in a row with this build, and then I do, for what it's worth, put a little bit less weight on leagues because there's a lot of people just learning decks and things like that there. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about why you played the list you did today or yesterday?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, initially I was playing the Average Reclaimer version from the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
so that depended on my earlier relations to Legacy because it was about like 2018 or so where I started to play the Turbo Depths deck and different Depths versions, and always played the Average Reclaimer because it's very useful in the deck. And that was the starting point, I would say, when I thought about to change my relation to the legacy deck from the single big threat to a wider board. And that was in the beginning where Oko was legal in the format. So yeah, from the beginning, I didn't really see or liked the Nettle Sentinel versions because they are a bit too um, straightforward. They don't really interact with the opponent, and if they are disrupted, they are much more weaker. And yeah, um, then in the last years, I always played the Elvish Reclaimer versions. And also until the end of the last year, I would say I was very successful with the deck. Had a lot of top eights. Yeah, as you mentioned, it was 6 or 7 top eights in a very short time frame. And then we saw evolution of the metagame where Moonstompy was one of the best decks in the format, or even the best deck in the format.
Hmm.
They played 4 Fury and a lot of damage-based cards. So then that was the time where the evolution changed a bit about the air stack, and the artisan build was coming around. But in the meanwhile, I wasn't really getting into love with the artisan build, I would say, and remained to play the reclaimer versions. And when White Genitive came into the format, I was thinking that going a bit faster and proceeding to the board faster than the reclaimer versions can do that is a very efficient way to combat the genitive mechanic. Usually, if everything goes right in the Nettle Sentinel version, you can just put 4 creatures into play on turn 2. And then if they play the White Plume Adventurer, for example, or the other affirmative creatures, and you can just attack with all of your creatures, and you get the initiative back, and going with more creatures after that. But yeah, initially, the Reclaimer version was my prioritized build to play Elves, and I would say sometimes if the metagame demands for that, we can change to the Elemental Sentinel build, but Elvish Reclaimer is my uh, one of my favorite creatures in Magic at all. So I will always play this creature if it makes sense or if I can do it successfully in the metagame.
You and I both. We are, yeah. Elvish Reclaimer, there's no secret, is probably a top five favorite creature for me, if not the number one as well. So, we share that in common. Um, I think without getting into the weeds too much, was there any specific metagame you were preparing for yesterday, or did you just kind of sleeved up or register this list because you? I know you have 5-0 for quick background on everyone. Any metagame consideration for any of the card choices or no?
Yeah, I just watched at the Goldfish side and I saw that Delver, Reanimator, Cephalid Breakfast, Painter, and 8-cast are the most common mm, or yeah successful decks in the last weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that almost all of them are good matchups for us. So um, Cephalid Breakfast can be a bit problematic depending on the list, but I would say that the Reclaimer version is very good prepared for it anyway because we have Wujukabok and all of the other versions or the other decks are beatable with our deck. 8-cast is almost a buy. And Painter can be a bit hard to play against because if they catch us with a Fury, it's
Mm-hmm.
problematic for us. But with the Gear's Blessing tech, it is almost impossible for us to lose against their fast starts.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that was one of the reasons uh, why I played this list yesterday, and also it was leading me to play Fairy Macabre over Leyline because it
Cephalid
has much
Breakfast.
more text against Painter, and it has always good text against the Cephalid Breakfast lists. And there's also a world where I can imagine the card to bring in against Delver, but
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole different story because it's just a 2/2 flyer, and you can also catch the opponent by surprise if they are attacking with the DRC. So, but we don't have that much slots probably to take out of the deck to justify the addition of the Fairy Macabre against Delver. But by the way, that was an idea I also had, and maybe we can test a bit with that.
You're not alone.
If
That is, I've also flirted with the idea of bringing Fairy Macabre in just to like ambush a DRC in combat. So it's definitely something I've considered, and if we need more slots, something we can test in the future for sure. Everything that you said there is in alignment with, and for full disclosure, Jurg and I actually did not discuss metagame prior to this. We just kind of caught up on our personal lives, but uh, what Jurg said about the metagame, I also kind of agree. Like all the matchups he mentioned, I think are actually quite favorable for us. The one that would be hard otherwise is probably Painter, I think. But I think the Guy's Blessing has completely swung that matchup around. And I think I agree with everything you just said because not having to run all our creatures into feeder because we're not scared of losing the combo is a big strategic advantage. All right. With that said, did you want to add anything before we go to the first match that you want to review, or
Yeah, just one small thing I noticed now. The control decks are a bit different than in the last months, I would say. So I think most of the control decks are focusing on Rescue control
Mhm.
with either with Hull Breacher and Days Undoing, or sometimes with Monastery Mentor. And the band control decks are usually trusting on the Euro as a win condition. And yeah, the second Crust in the sideboard was very VIP, I would say. And
Mhm.
it's very good to have more ways to either create card advantage, which are not relying on drawing cards, but creating creatures, and also very good to have more ways to kill opposing creatures or planeswalkers. And that's a very good uh, way to interact on very different axes with the deck.
Right, right.
But that that's all I want to add to this point. And if you want, we can just jump into the replays.
Yeah, let's jump
Any
into the
questions from the chat, maybe?
Oh yeah, good idea. Before we jump into the replays, yeah, I do agree. The second grace is something that we probably should have been doing earlier, especially if control is, popular. But yeah, if there are no questions, we can. Jurg has actually handpicked a few matchups that he thought were more interesting instead of reviewing the whole event. So I think that is a good idea and probably the best interest of everyone's time. Um, so Inigo here brought up the Rex Sage. How was it for you, Jurg?
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Inigo. Yeah, the Rex Sage. Usually, I'm not really high on that card in the past, but there is one like deck building principle for me. I would say usually in the past I was playing usually two for Sofigo in the sideboard, and I want always, as you see in the list, I want always want ways to deal with either creatures, sorry, lands like Tabernacle or Dark Depths or Glacial Chasm, for example, and problematic permanents like Mujava's Jitter, maybe sometimes Blood Moon, Trinisphere, and so on. And that's the reason why I added more artifact and enchantment hate to the list. So at this point, I have three ways to deal with those permanent types if necessary. And the Reclamation Sage is just because I have fewer slots around in this list. And I don't really like to play a single Force of Vigor. And I really like the way to either get an artifact or enchantment removal via Green Sun Zenith or via Natural Order. And sometimes, if you play against Urza Saga, then it's very important to just prevent them from searching from a specific cards they're getting from. And in combination with the Reclamation Sage, if you destroy the Urza Saga, you just have a Stone Rain. And it's very useful to have the flexibility to get the card if you need it. But usually, if we just think about like artifact cards like Mishra's Bauble or something like that, the Collector Roof is very helpful as well. But one way to lose against 8 casts, in my opinion, is that the opponent gets value out of the Urza Saga and create a couple of big constructs that can be a bit problematic sometimes. And if you just prevent that by destroying the Urza Saga, you set them back on lands and on mana, and you also prevent them from getting the big constructs into play, or at least a couple of them. And yeah, doing that several times in combination with the Wild Symbiote is kind of broken if it happens, but it's very mana demanding, so you have to spend 4 mana for that to get it with Queen's Unseated. But as it's also an elf, it even can attack with the Elder Shepherd. So I think the upside from the first copy is very high. But if I had the opportunity to play more or have more slots in the sideboard, I would probably play to Force of Vigor instead. But if I am limited to one slot because of other cards like the Second Wrists, the additional Graveyard Hate, and the Caracas for the Depths and the Reanimator matchup and Sneak and Show, then sometimes it can happen, and I think the first copy of the Reclamation Sage gives a lot to the list, at least in this version, because we can recur it with the Wirewood Symbiote.
No, that. Thank you for answering that question, and also thank you for reminding me that actually, for those of you who will follow our Discord channel and especially on Patreon, we there's actually been new tech that I've been testing in the sense in the way of Urza Saga. Jörg actually brought up to my attention like, should we be playing like a one of Saga because it's an enchantment to get it off Atraxa, right? Especially in Reclaimer builds where you can to tutor for it. So we could either discuss this now or discuss this later. Jörg, what do you think about like possible changes going forward, especially since I think the tech that I've been testing, I 5-0'd the other night with it, and then also Eureka Mike Reed also 5-0'd and posted on Twitter the exact same list yesterday, and I think that is potentially interesting for this build as well. Do you want to
Yeah,
discuss this maybe now or after the matches?
I would prefer if we can do it after the session, after the replays. Uh, yeah, but I would also say if you can add some more consistency to the triggered ability of Atraxa,
Mm-hmm.
because usually in the last days I tested the card. I usually had like an ancestral recall, which is still okay for the card because the body of the creature is so good.
Uh-huh.
And after that, with getting 3 cards, it's almost like with the Glimpse of Nature. So sometimes you get like a Cradle and a Creature and Crimson Zenith, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a usually draw 3 from a Glimpse of Nature. And if you get that on top of the body of the creature from Ataxa, it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can tweak a bit to just get more value and get more um, yeah, cards you can use out of that. But
Mm-hmm.
we can discuss that if you want. We can just discuss that after the replays, I would say.
Sounds
I have
good.
some ideas. I have some more ideas about that, but the crowd is be very curious about the replays, I assume.
For sure. Okay, let's jump into the first match that you're ready, and we can discuss going forward some of the ideas that we had for this to make the deck even better, right, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So as it was a 10-round tournament, I don't think we have enough time to just watch all the replays. But I would say we can just start with the round 2.
Mm-hmm.
It was against the Hull Breacher version, Jeskai Day Breacher. And I think it's a good way to learn a lot of that because there were happening different things in those games, and these were also very long games. And as I know that my good friend Inigo wants to learn a bit or about the control matchups, I think that's a good starting point. And also, this is my only loss from the tournament, so
No, that's all good points. I'm glad you brought that up because it's mentioned in the
yeah.
Twitch chat that this matchup is very popular too right now.
Yeah. So here, I'm after my draw step now, so I drew the collector roof. How do you like the starting hand, by the way? So as I see the starting hand, it doesn't really look that impressive for me, but also not that bad, I would say. How do you like the starting hand, Newton?
I think with that list, I probably would have kept two because we're a critical mass at the end of the day, and I don't really want to mulligan if we can avoid it. Uh, my
Yeah, from the Once Upon a Time, we can usually get like a Avish Reclaimer, for example, and the Elder Shepherd covers all the blue matchups and also good against Chalice. So, as you said, we can just start with the uh, yeah, Once Upon a Time, and then um, here I didn't really fetch first because I wanted the fetch lands to be live later, uh, mainly for the Black Mana source, and also to get Triad Arbors in the future, because in this situation here, my start would be playing the Once Upon a Time and see what I get from it. And usually I would start with the Elazar Shepherd and follow with the Avish Visionary next turn. And then I have the fetch lands for the Dryad Arbor. And after that, I have at least the possibility to get value out of the Cradle. Not really sure what the opponent was playing.
Mhm.
So here I should have taken either the Shepherd or the Reclaimer, but I mainly think that I um, already have the Trias Cradle. I can just take the second Shepherd and play it as a bait creature.
I
Any
think
other ideas
I think if
if
it
you
were
see
me,
this card?
because they led with Island, you know that we're not going to get our creature removed this turn. I
Yeah,
probably would have either taken Reclaimer or the Druid. I think with this, Reclaimer doesn't represent a payoff with the exact 75. So I may have taken the Druid only because I want to like have extra mana with, and we have a couple draws with our draw step and Visionary. But
yeah. Yeah, so mana isn't really the point. I would say I have
mhm,
enough lands.
mhm,
So
that's fair.
getting the uncounterability was very important for me. And as a second one, it's also like a must kill spell from the opponent. Here I just fetch for the forest uh, because I see two basic lands. I don't really want to run into back to basics or something like that.
Right, right, right.
And didn't really needed the black mana at this point, I would say. And also, if I expect control decks, I would like to keep the Dryad Arbors back for later
Mhm,
and not expose them that early. So here, I just played another Visionary to just draw more cards. The opponent has three mana open, and now we see the Hullbreacher.
mhm.
So a bit punishing, but I didn't really had that much other plays, I would say. And here I just play the Collector Roof to just make their treasure token irrelevant.
Mhm.
And we see a big punish in this game in a couple of turns. So here we have Wirewood Symbiote, which was a good draw to protect my creatures. Then I play the Allosaurus Shepherd and I bash the team and attack. Also with the Collector Roof to just get the Hull Breacher out of the way.
Mhm.
Then they just cycle Truck Typhoon. And here I made a mistake because I thought I needed to play around Supreme Verdict. I didn't really had on my radar that if they playing the Hull Breacher, I will expect the Days Undoing. So I decided to bounce the Elvish also Shepherd
Uh-huh.
to just protect them from any removal.
Mhm.
And yeah, what was happening next turn was that the opponent plays Days Undoing.
Oof, that's brutal.
Uh, and then yeah. my top deck was very irrelevant. Relevant. I don't have anything to do here. I can just attack with the collector oof
Mm-hmm.
to just free up the card drawing, and the opponent also blocked. They had a lot of mana now,
They probably have
and
another copy, if I would imagine.
yeah, I also thought about that. They could have another copy, but they didn't
Oh,
had it. So yeah, now they just play a huge truck with Shark Typhoon.
I'm kind of surprised they blocked.
Yeah, me too. So they freed up the card draw ability. Maybe they had an asset or something like that in the hand.
Mm-hmm.
Not really sure about that. Yeah. And now he freed up my card drawing ability. So now I have Glimpse of Nature, which was a must counter for them. They had Force of Negation, and I could draw a couple of cards now. Unfortunate to draw the Adraxa, but that's usually the case. If we play the card, we just similar like the
Progenitus, right?
Ingme yes. Now they respond with the Wandering Emperor to prevent untapping the creature, which was irrelevant in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they just gave me an opportunity. They have 5 cards in hand. Not really sure if it was necessary to do that here at that point, but I thought there is actually a window. And also, I thought that I could see that they had F6ing, so they F6'd and were not responding to my last place.
Mm-hmm.
So that was maybe a good window to go for the Crater Hoof now, and then I attacked him for exactly 12 damage. So which
Wow.
was very, very strange to win that game after the big fault of bouncing the Elizabeth Shepherd and then getting Days Undoinged. And but they did the mistake to just block the collector oof. They had a couple of mana here around, so maybe that was their main reason why they did want to do that. And they also had a 6/6 flying, but if I draw multiple cards a turn, then I will find a window to just uh, raise the shark. So here
Yeah.
was lucky.
Yeah, as we go to the next game here, I
Yeah,
guess my big takeaway there was I think your mistake was kind of minor, and I can see why the logic for bouncing because you're trying to play around a supreme verdict. I don't
yeah,
think they would have had it because they played the Hull Breacher, but it's a consideration. I think
yeah,
their mistake was pretty big though compared to yours.
yeah. And maybe it was a bit like common play patterns I remembered from the past. So if I have a big board, I just have to protect my creatures from the sweeper,
Uh huh.
but not realizing if they have the Hell Breacher on the board, they have the combo, and then I get set back so much. But here in the situation, you would saw if they just place the Days Undoing, and with my board they will just lose. So keeping the Shepherd on in play was actually right,
Yes.
and just bouncing maybe one of the other creatures would be okay. But once I did that, I also realized, oh, hopefully he doesn't have the Days Undoing, and then it happens.
Yeah, we've all been
But with a
there
good
where we
end.
we realized the mistake right after. But I
Yeah,
think we were lucky that they, for some reason, blocked the collector, which I don't think was correct.
yeah, me too. So here, sideboarding, I was taking out a couple of heritage druids, the collector oof, one glimpse because I knew that they have Hull Breacher and maybe a couple of Narsets. Didn't really need it to wipe the graveyard, so that
Mm-hmm.
was why I removed the endurances and also trimmed the cradle because I expect the game to be very long.
Mm-hmm.
So my first hand, unfortunately, has a Atraxa in the starting hand. I didn't want to be at the same point like last game,
Mm-hmm.
so I decided to mulligan that. And here we have solid hand, I would say. A bit demanding from the top, but we are drawing a couple, or we see a couple of cards in the game. So, and here the first draw was the second natural order.
That's pretty unlucky, unfortunately.
Yeah. And in this game, we also see a very relevant situation where I decided to go for a card, fetching the second Dried Arbor. And this situation, yeah, they got me. They just got me. And two cards which come to our mind would be Kozilek's Return and the good old Is It Static Caster.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I thought, okay, probably they have the Hull Breacher again, maybe also Containment Priest, but this card just wasn't on my radar. And now they have destroyed two of my lands. If they didn't do that, I would just be able to create to cast the Natural Order, and then in the next turn also again Natural Order. Maybe even start with the Glimpse of Nature as a bait spell, but here I was set back into Stone Age a bit, and now
uh,
was forced.
for what it's worth, I probably wouldn't have Static Caster on my radar either. So I don't I don't think I would fault you for making that play. I think I would. It's suspicious that they don't do anything with 3 mana, but it could be Hull Breacher. So I don't. I think it's a play I may make it myself. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much for that.
Yeah, and you know that I had two Natural Orders, so it was very um, sensible to just uh, get the Triad Arbor to get creatures to sacrifice for the Natural Order.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to just live with that to run into either like is a static caster or Kozilek's Return if that cards get played.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where you pick what you want to lose to, and then if they have it, they have it. Like you can't play around it, like, every single card, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
But
here they have the super hard lock, like they can just destroy all my creatures, and then I don't be able to draw cards.
uh huh.
And as they have the Planeswalker now to create more creatures, I didn't really see any realistic way to win that game again, and then just
Th-
scooped.
this is this is an important
Probably a bit
takeaway.
early.
Yeah, we can go to the third game, but I think this is a big important takeaway that I like, especially in paper play, where if your opponent is like not playing the quickest, for instance, it's good to recognize when to concede
Yeah,
because you don't want to. The worst thing that can happen is getting an unintentional draw.
exactly. And on MTGO, you always have the clock sometimes on your side and sometimes against your side. So here I only have 15 seconds ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And drawing the additional nature orders, having all of my Triad Arbors in the bin. So if I had a Triad Arbor around, I could just try to go for a fetchland and then getting Atraxa. And there was also a window, or there's always a window sometimes where you can just cheat in the Atraxa. But
Mm-hmm.
in this situation, I thought, okay, it's
I
too
think it's gonna
unrealistic
be.
to do that.
I agree with the Static Caster and the Hull Breacher. It's
Yeah,
probably gonna be very difficult from here.
yeah. So here, very solid starting hand, I would say. So just starting with the Shepherd, or even keep it, then playing the Visionary, then the Christ next, and maybe in turn four we can try to go for the Glimpse.
It's a little bit on the slower side, but I would have kept for sure as well.
Yeah, Christ is a must-keeping card against any control deck.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gris is
I
just too
don't see any
good.
worlds where I don't keep the Grist hand here.
Also, I like the good play patterns for those who may not realize. As a general rule of thumb, whatever you fetch second is typically the opposite of what you fetch first. So, getting the Bayou first, you want to play around back to basics or whatever. So you get the basic four second. So something that might not go noticed by the audience.
Yeah. And also very important to notice here is sometimes you just drawing cards and then you need the black source after that. For example, for casting the grist or top decked Thoughtseize.
Mm-hmm.
So having the second black or the last black source here left is very important sometimes. And if you fetch two bio that early, and then if I top decked like Elvish Visionary, I almost forced to cast this out of my two lands. And
Mm-hmm.
if I don't have a black mana left in my deck, I can't really cast a top decked Thoughtseize, for example.
Yes,
So
excellent point.
here, yeah. So here they handled the Shepherd, and I just continue by trying to resolve the Grist, which gets countered. And very good to have procedure here for this annoying Grafting Cage. So
Mm-hmm.
next turn I can just get my Dryad Arbor. Top decking the second glimpse is bad for me in the situation, but it enables crazy and broken turns in the future if they don't have the Hull Breacher. But here they have the static caster again, unfortunately.
Yeah, that card is quite annoying, especially for this build because it we this build is typically uh, fairly immune to Plague Engineer, and Static Caster gets around that because it kills the other stuff.
Yeah. And here we have a very strange yeah, board situation. I would say I think my plan is just get as much value out of the glimpse as possible, but I don't really see a good situation here at that point. Can try to get a lot of mana, and this would also be helping if I top deck like an Elvish Reclaimer, but they have a lot of spot removal. And also, as longer as I wait, I improve the chance that I get Hullbreacher or Narset. So I'm not really sure, but I think at this point it's not a good idea to just try to go for the glimpse at least this turn.
I think if it were me, I probably would have tried to fire off one glimpse because I don't think it's going to get much better because we
Yeah,
are a little bit tied up on mana because of the Static Caster.
yeah, okay. So what I was hoping for was just an second creature, so I get at least or try to get two draws out of the first glimpse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Here we just see the removal heavy hand from them, so no counter spells, but removal. So yeah, I decided to get the instant speed removal card, which could be mattering regarding the mana production in the
Mm-hmm.
next turn. So if I top deck like an Elvish Reclaimer, for example,
Mm-hmm.
then I can create at least a couple of mana before they are able to interact with the static caster.
Yeah, I think
And also another reason to hold back here was because I bought it in two snuff outs. Should be two snuff outs, which I bought it in
right.
to
I like that
interact with
boarding
the
plan.
static caster. So when I saw the is it static caster in game two, so it was a reason to just interact with the Hull Breacher and the static caster.
Mm-hmm.
And here, yeah, was now the point where I wanted to get value out of the glimpse and just draw a couple of cards.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's pretty reasonable, I think.
yeah, yeah, I was forced to because now they had a 3/3 flyer. And now I drew two Once Upon a Times, which was very useless at that point.
Yeah, not with the current board.
Yeah,
I think there is some merit for the previous turn when you didn't when you waited on the Glimpse of Nature to deck thin with fetching on their step, so that would potentially make the Glimpse of Nature a little bit better, but very small, I think.
yeah. And one other thing at this situation was because I discarded the Swords of Two Plowshares,
Mm-hmm.
getting an Atraxa into play was always a good way to just turn around the game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, usually they are able to just play swords on that or sometimes even the fairy,
Mm-hmm.
but facing a static caster and a flying creature, so Atraxa was one of the last hopes I had in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
But now, as I saw that they have yeah, the possibility to attack for 5 and I'm not able to search for anything,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, was the end of this game for me. And yeah, it was unfortunate because they had very much of the hate beers in their list. So
Right.
they were very well prepared for the elves matchups, I would say. So Static Caster usually isn't the card you see that often. And this card is way harder for the deck to interact with than a single mass removal like Kozilek's Return. Sometimes Kozilek's Return, okay, that happens. It's a one-time effect, but this um, does damage each turn and unless you handle it.
Yeah, I think it's secretly better against us than Plague Engineer because the ability to hit Arbor and the ability to hit Wirewood is a big deal. Like the deck, our deck is for the most part built to beat Plague Engineer. We can we're not really built at the moment to handle Static is the caster. Set, and the one of the few ways to beat it is either to answer with removal or to thought seize it outright. Like,
Uh,
you want to go to the next match?
um, yeah, and of course, but I think so. Static Caster, we didn't see that card in the past, but no- as we are after we talked about the metagame earlier, I think the card isn't really that bad positioned. Also because it interacts with Painter a bit because it can destroy the welders, and it
Mm-hmm.
also interacts with Cephalid Bravefest as they killing both of their combo creatures,
Mm-hmm.
at least. So I don't think that the card is bad or something like that, and it's not really that good. But I definitely see the point why the player decided to play the card in this event
No, that's a good
for the expected metagame.
yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even consider the metagame implications, but um, instant speed is also a big deal. And I think if you want to hate out like our deck, for instance, I find instant speed sweepers to be much scarier than something like a plague engineer or a supreme verdict, right? Like it's hard,
Sometimes Fury, yes.
right?
Even
Sometimes Fury.
sometimes Fury is possible to play around.
Yeah, it's much harder to play around something like a static caster or a Kozilek's return, in my opinion. It sounds like you
Yeah,
agree, a year.
okay. Yeah. So if you don't mind, we can continue to the next match.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a 7 round tournament. So we just jump to the next rounds. So third round was probably okay, that was Dino Stompy. Um,
Yeah, I don't think that matchup is that interesting.
yeah, me neither. So round 4 was True Futurism on Cloudpost. He had a blue splash in it for Flusterstorm and Stifle. Round 5 was Delver, so very easy. The one thing I want to mention against Delver was I had the Natural Order in my hand for a very long time and was very patient. And one of the easiest things for me was they didn't have a clock, so they just had interactive spells. They played like 3 bolts in the game one,
Mm-hmm.
destroying my creatures, but it didn't matter. So I played more creatures, and they didn't have a clock at all. And but they have 5 cards in their hand, so I knew okay, they definitely have the capability of force of willing anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I just played a couple of small elf creatures and attacked and attacked and attacked. And then later, with the Once Upon a Time, I found the Alazar Shepherd. And then I thought, okay, they already had removed or they used 3 removal spells. Now I can go for the Nature Order.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got Atraxa and they scooped. So I assume both of the Devilists in this weekend weren't really prepared for the Elves deck because it wasn't really that successful in the last weeks. And they was
Mm-hmm.
focusing more or for other matchups. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see any hate cards like End the Festivities or Rough Tumbles out of these games. So very
Or
good to
submerge.
know, but this will change. For example, yes, Serra Submerge is always in, but this will change in the next days, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So here, round 6 was Reanimator. Uh, in game 2, I had two ways of interacting, Endurance with Pitch and Ferry Macabre. And with the first interaction, I used the Ferry Macabre.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time, I had the Endurance up, but they had show and tell, so didn't really matter. And yeah, that's very good if you have two interactions and a discard spell, for example. It's super good to have against Reanimator.
Right.
But mm, yeah, and surprisingly, I won game 1 against Reanimator, but my hand was absolutely insane against them. I had the natural endurance with pitch, and I also had Once Upon a Time found Elvish Reclaimer. So with the first thing, I interacted with the endurance, then I played the Reclaimer and drew the second land from the top. And then from that point, they didn't have any good window to get the creature into play.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, game 3 also had endurance and reclaimer, so very good. No, sorry, I had a discard spell and endurance as a protection, probably. So we just jump into the win and in match. It was round 7, and
Mm-hmm.
I was a bit confused about the tournament structure because I used to play the Saturday challenges as 6 round tournaments.
Uh-huh.
But as we had 68 players, suddenly there was a 7th round of Swiss, and I thought, okay, I'm already in the top 8. And I also wrote a message to you, oh, Newton, I'm in the top 8 in the Saturday challenge, but it was the win and in match yet, and yeah, it was a really hard one. So usually we say 8 cast is a very good matchup for
Mm-hmm.
us. It's always good positive for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have a very hard fight, or I have a very hard fight against them in the whole match.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am on the draw. Yeah, I think if I see the starting hand, I knew that they're playing 8 cast. So I think the starting hand has two good cards. I would say these are the two greens and Sainets, and my plan was to just ramp for Triad Arbor and
Mm-hmm.
get Collector Oof next turn, which is usually GG for them.
Right.
Um, yeah, it has too few creatures, so it wasn't. So the hand has a lot of upside. If I
Mm-hmm.
top deck, for example, like a Cradle, but getting those two cards and getting a realistic way to probably get to the Collector Oof early led me to keep the hand. How
So
do you like the hand? Would you keep the hand if you know that you're playing against 8 casts and you're on the draw as well?
I think I would keep this hand regardless. It's not great, but for the same reasons we discussed before. This deck doesn't really want to mulligan too much, and especially since you have a good chance at turn 2 collective, I think I would definitely keep. Um, Something that Jurg and I actually discussed before the stream also was the differences and strengths of the two different archetypes. So um, I think this list mulligans a little bit more because like Glimpse of Nature is not particularly good in this situation. But one of the benefits of Elvish Visionary is if you do mulligan, there is a higher chance that you can dig yourself out of it because you have a lot of redraws and to ways to improve your hand.
Yeah. And we see the classic beginning with the chalice. So yeah, but the two zeniths are also good against the chalice start because we are able to just get the shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we draw it. Sometimes we need to search for it. And here, the main probably The main problem is we didn't drew any lands from the top of the deck, and we are short on mana here in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And here they have the Ursa Saga, so they are able to create huge constructs now,
Mm-hmm.
especially in combination with the Sai. They even play the Mox Opal without using the mana. They just slam the whole hand onto the
Mm-hmm.
board to just create huge constructs. And now, as we are still don't have additional land, so if we are um, getting mana, we can do more different things and just get the collector oof and maybe win next turn with the glimpses. So, or even with the natural order. But here we are just too slow with less amount of mana,
Yeah,
and they are too fast with the constructs and with the shadow spear.
yeah, I think this is a very good point for everyone that realizing that collector oof is probably too slow at this board state, so you have to pivot. I think if it were me, I probably would lead with the Waterwood first to see if they have the Aurora because they have 4 mana up, and then I would probably Green Sun for 0 and try to win the next turn with Glimpse. I think that I would have taken that line.
Yeah, that's a good way. So here I thought that I need to find a cradle. So I have two draws out of the Wirewood Symbiote, and if I find a cradle, uh, there could be a world where I get to a point where I just get either Moseju or Collector Oof, because we need to just prevent them from trampling over our creatures.
Uh huh.
Um, if we can take a one hit, we can still win next turn with the natural order.
Uh huh.
Yeah, but it didn't really came up to this point that I found the GS Cradle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had
Yeah,
the.
but you're right. Sometimes we need to just hope that they are not able to kill us in the next turn and give us to the best possible point
Mm-hmm.
to just create the best advantage for our next turn if we come to that.
I
So ramping for second arbor to get more mana is very useful
I
and the
think
correct play.
I think we're both right in that sense. I forgot about actually the fact that the saga was on chapter 2, so they could actually search the shadow sphere. So we're actually forced into trying to go off this turn to shut off that line because they can grow the construct to too big. I don't remember how big it was at the time, but it's 16-16 right now, so presumably it's already too big. So I do think you do have to go off with Glimpse that turn, given that the Saga can find the Shadow Spear already. So I think we're both right. I think if it had not been, I probably would have taken the other line and just ran for one more turn and hope they don't do anything crazy, right?
Oh, sorry. I just was muting my microphone.
Uh,
So here in game two, we can just see how good Craftiger's Cage can be against else.
mm-hmm,
So here they disabled my Crimson Zenith. I just played a couple of creatures to the board.
mm-hmm. Is there a particular reason why you led with the Wirewood there? Is I'm assuming to protect the Shepherd and to bait them out into the Chalice, which happened.
Yes, exactly. Baiting to the chalice, so they just maybe they had different options for the second turn, but here, yeah, maybe with this play pattern that could look like they knew that they can't really die to the Grafdigger's Cage to the natural order here,
Mm-hmm.
and then this play pattern looked like that they could preparing a glimpse of nature turn
Right.
for the next turn
Mm-hmm.
and keeping the shepherd for as long as possible is very good.
Mm-hmm.
And also sometimes yeah, fringe things like the engineered explosives, and also some of the lists even play black engineer.
Hmm.
But here you see just a top decked, lucky top decked GS Cradle,
That's really
and
good.
here you see that most of the or none of the hate cards they had didn't even matter here.
Hmm.
Um, they just forced the once upon a time because they knew that if I find Elder Shepherd, it is useless.
Hmm.
Seemed that they don't had any removal spells here. Yeah, but top decking the Cradle was, of course, lucky. But there were a couple of draws which I had, which are very good in this
Hmm.
situation. So yeah, here they made a misplay, so I don't really know why. They just dismembered the Wirewood Symbiote, probably a misclick. But they knew that I will protect the Shepherd next turn,
Hmm.
and in the next turn they would still have taken a lot of damage, and then the next turn they could have gotten a Pissing Needle. So probably it was a misclick because they killed the
I think
symbiote in response to the activation.
either misclick or they just forgot, right? That it's still lethal on board. It's one
Yeah,
or the other.
okay.
Sometimes that happens too, where like I know I'm thinking something and then like 10 seconds pass and then I just forget exactly what I was thinking before and just like make the wrong play. So I can see something like that happening too with the opponent.
Yeah, the first hand had two dried arbors and very useless hand, and this one is solid.
Uh-huh.
Not perfect, but okay, I'm on the draw again, and usually I used to be that 8 cast players are boarding out the chalices against the elf decks because we have 3 to 4 shepherds,
Hmm.
but probably they don't have any good other cards to bring in, and they kept the chalices. So here they drew a lot of cards, first Swordcast and Thought Monitor.
Uh-huh.
And here it was good for me that they tapped out because if they had mana open, it would be too risky to go for the Dryad Arbor.
Agreed.
But here we have a good way to produce more mana with the Future Cradle.
Hmm.
Now we have the Green Sun Zenith, which was very good. And I decided to go for the Visionary first to draw cards. Uh, Somehow they decided to counter that.
I feel like our opponent is very trigger happy with their forces in this matchup. Like based on what I've seen so far, like sometimes it's correct to be aggressively forcing, but it's two
Yeah,
games in a row already that they just kind of like randomly forced the first thing.
yeah, it looks a bit like nervous, nervous
Yeah.
handling of any of the magic cards I try to cast. Um, yeah, okay, they set me back on mana a bit, or at least with the future cradles. But I don't really see a world where it's correct to counter the card because it's just a card draw for one, and it's a one-one creature.
Yeah, they must think
But
like, oh, they need to get value off the force before you have Shepherd. Like that's the only reasoning for that, I think.
yeah,
Because like I can see it being correct sometimes, but two games in a row seems kind of already high, if that makes sense.
here, sorry, it uh, was too fast. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on one
No,
wrong
no, it's
button.
okay.
What we saw here was I had 2 ways. I had the opportunity to go for the collector roof in the last turn, but if we see the board here, I would say the impact of the collector roof is quite low. And here I decided to go for the reclamation sage instead
Mm-hmm.
to just handle this Vaga because um, they create, they are probably able to create more tokens with Psi in this point.
Mm-hmm.
And one way to lose the game would be if they create huge constructs.
Okay.
And I don't think that Collector Roof would have mattered that much at this board state because they already have flying power here, um, and they are still able to create the constructs. And with the previous cards I had, usually Collector Roof is the safest bet in this matchup.
Uh-huh.
But here I wanted to go for the Reclamation Sage first to just set them back on mana as well. And also it is very good to, if we just can recur it with the Wirewood Simiate in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next turn I'm usually planning to play the Glimpse of Nature anyway to create card advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also able to attack, probably attacking with the elf creatures here.
Uh-huh.
So
I actually like that play a
it's good.
lot, and I think not a lot of elf players can pivot the way that you did there. So what I mean by that is like I like that you recognize that the board state, similar to the other game, I think it was like game one, where Collector Oof is probably not going to be good enough. So you have to adapt, and I think one of the strengths of the deck is uh, we have fairly high adaptability in the mid game with this version, or with with elves in general because of the of Green Sun Zenith and some of the other ways to tutor.
Yeah, exactly. So here I probably did a mistake. You know what was happening? I
Uh,
tried to resize the window and
oh, don't tell me you
probably,
misclicked.
no, I didn't misclick, but I tried to resize the window
Oh,
from
and
the
it
Once Upon a
crashed.
Time, and probably the client crashed now. So we should probably try to restart. I can try to restart it, but we should probably just take a short break if it's okay for you.
Yeah, let's do that.
So if you can just put the I think you have a screen
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the
I'll put
pause, so
the
I can
pause
just
here.
relog into the client.
Hmm. So
Could
I
be a
could.
good point for a short break on the bathroom or something like that.
Okay, let's just say 5 minute break as we use the restroom and then we'll be right back in about 5 minutes. How does that sound?
Yeah, good idea. See you in 5.
Okay.
I decided to just trim one glimpse and one wirewood symbiote here, but expectingly from this point of the game, it just single-handedly will win the game on its own because yeah, it just draws us more cards with the glimpse and also is able to just recover the glimpse of the reclamation sage. Here I decide to just take a second reclaimer. I have another choice of Gear's Cradle and Virtual Ranger, but I decide to get the reclaimer
Hmm.
because it's a more stable body. And then I
So,
want to draw cards with the glimpse.
one quick question. You're so I had the first part of when we resumed muted. Just to quickly catch everybody up. So
Yeah.
long story short, off the Once Upon a Time, I think it's fairly obvious to try to search for a Wireware symbiote or a Visionary. So Jurg mentioned that it was a disappointing once, but part of the reason why Once Upon a Time is still good potentially in a glimpse build is because finding a key cradle or a key wirewood to keep the glimpse chain going is very important. Sorry, I'll let you continue, Jurg.
So here, yeah, I just draw cards with the glimpse. And I have the bad habit, I would say, that I try to just go nuts with the glimpse. So we know that we just bottomed Gear's Cradle.
Uh-huh.
And here I would say getting the higher chance to just get the Wirewood Symbiote because we know these cards weren't with the Wirewood Symbiote. We know that we bottomed cards. So
Mm-hmm.
here I think there's a good chance that if I draw two cards here and find another elf, I can draw a lot of cards, and also there is a world where I can just where this can lead to a game win in this turn
Mm-hmm.
on the spot. And if I find the Wirewood Symbiote, I would also say the game ends on the spot. But here, yeah, but this is a bad habit because most of the time it doesn't really work for me. And
Mm-hmm.
here I play the second Reclaimer and I just draw two lands. So the Glimpse chain is ended.
Mm-hmm.
So initially I was disappointed about the Glimpse chain, but on the other hand, we see that there were lands on the top of the deck. So when I saw the replay on my own, I knew that the lands would be on the top still after not playing the Glimpse.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, with the first Reclaimer or with the Claimers, I would be able to to thin the deck out.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, at least one of the lands would be on the top anyway, so it was unfortunate to get stopped by the Glimpse chain at this
Mm-hmm.
point. And here we have now a point where the game changes. So I was straight ahead from the turns, at least after I played Reclamation Sage. And now they have second Saga. They create a lot of top dot tokens every turn. And
Mm-hmm.
here I top decked another Once Upon a Time.
Mm-hmm.
Still, I was hoping for the Wirewood Symbiote here. And here we have a week Once Upon a Time again, and we see Collector Roof, Boseiju, and Gear's Cradle. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, they are two very good cards in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And here, still, I have a doubt that the Collector Roof changes anything about the game or the board state in this turn.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to take the Boseiju because I wanted to um, destroy the Saga to just not get them more construct tokens, and um, they only had one card in hand, so it could be a removal spell. So I think it's safest to get the Saga destroyed this turn after they used um, the ability to create a construct. And another thing we have to plan ahead for the next turn here in this situation was that they have a full graveyard of artifacts
Mm-hmm.
and they have Emery on the board. And
Mm-hmm.
here we have a lot of artifacts which mattering in this board state. which would be first pissing needle.
Mm-hmm.
If they take the pissing needle back, they can just shut down my shepherd, for example, or Wirewood Symbiote, because I want to expect the card,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even bounce any of the creatures, but that wouldn't be that relevant for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so here I think destroying the Saga and keep up 2 mana for the Reclaimer was the main priority.
Mm-hmm.
But here it was bad that I already used the Cradle because that led to a point that I needed to activate the Cradle for the Shepherd and attack, but wasn't really able to figure out what I do next. So I knew that I can't really destroy multiple things. I
Mm-hmm.
also knew that 5 very good cards are on the top or were on the top of my library,
Mm-hmm.
but I can only decide for one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it was very difficult
Mm-hmm.
and also was late. It was a win and in for the tournament. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I also was on the flu and wasn't really on a that high situation
Mm-hmm.
on my uh, health situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be very interesting, which would be the proposed line to play here and attack. How many creatures do we attack with?
Mm-hmm.
And not risking that the Elizabeth Shepherd dies.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have multiple factors to consider, and it was very interesting to analyze the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But here I came to this, or at least I wanted to know or to see that usually I have to attack with as most of the creatures as possible to
Mm-hmm.
just keep their top doors down, uh, because they can attack with the top doors in the air and they beat my sort of shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, it doesn't really do that much because they don't get any damage.
Mm-hmm.
And another fact to consider was that I brought in Caracas out of the sideboard as well. I
Mm-hmm.
used to bring it in against 8 cast, and I could have gotten Caracas with the Avish Reclaimer. Yeah, but probably I decided to do the worst play because okay, I took the Boseiju. As I mentioned, I wanted to handle the Saga
Mm-hmm.
in this situation, and then I activated the Shepherd with the 1 mana left, and then I had the situation: how much creatures do I attack with? And then I decided to just attack with one, which was so irrelevant because they just blocked with one Topter.
Right,
But
right.
here it was interesting because I had mana up, enough mana up to just destroy the Boseiju. Sorry, there was a Saga with Boseiju,
Uh-huh.
and keep 2 mana up with Elvish Reclaimer. But 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 strangely, I didn't really see that any of the removal spells or Tavara that the opponent would have top decked would just
Mm-hmm.
kill me on the spot because I only have one creature left on the battlefield.
Right.
And if they attack with all of all of their creatures, I'm just dead because I only have 10 life.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really matter that much because they didn't really had the opportunity. Now they were sacrificing artifacts with Sai to just create more tokens, to dig for more cards. And luckily for me, they just milled one of the Dismember and one of the Otawara
Mm-hmm.
out of the Emry. So any of those cards would have killed me on the spot. But
Mm-hmm.
here I can just jump block. And yeah, I only need Green Sun Zenith. I only need Natural Order. I only need Wirewood Symbiote. I had so many live top decks from the top, and I just need more time to find my payoff, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So here I attack with all of them because there was not really a danger that they can kill the other Shepherd at that point.
Right. I think the funny thing is, I don't know if you've seen the previous stream, but Curran also won a challenge when he was sick too. So, or not sick, but he was hung over from the night before. So it seems to be a trend with us elves players.
Yeah, and honestly, if you are telling that, so an Eternal Weekend, it was also a very interesting story because it was I was waking up before 5 a.m.,
I
played the
remember.
first the Wasteland
Mm-hmm.
event together with you,
Mm-hmm.
and then I dropped after round 3, I would say, and was going to bed for like 3 hours or so. And after that, I played the Bio event, and
Yeah,
we all
that
know
that was
what
one of
was
my
the result.
favorite weekends because I went to bed and I had messaged you. Oh yeah, I made the top eight, and then I woke up and then you were telling me, oh, I'm in the top eight as well in the next event. So that was pretty nice.
Yeah. So here I was in jump lock mode, so I needed to just find enough time to, and finally we find the natural order.
Uh huh.
The opponent only has 2 minutes, about 2 minutes on the clock.
Hmm.
I think there would be a world where I could just try to find enough time to just mm, yeah,
I don't think so
out
actually.
time the opponent.
I don't think so on this board state because they have enough flyers to get the last five damage.
Yeah, but they need to. So if I attacked with all the AF creatures, they needed to block, and they
Oh,
would only have four flying maximum four flying damage power. But you're right. So they can just flying over. But here I would say if I don't would have top decked the natural order,
hmm
their plan would be to just block with the thought monitors to draw more cards out of that,
hmm
and that would benefit the opponent more because they are able to draw like
Right, right, right,
4 or 6 cards per turn. And here, yeah, finally, after uh, almost half of the deck,
yeah,
we found the natural order.
right.
So it was a very hard fight against 8 cast, and usually it's not really like that. So usually it's straightforward, and they don't be able to interact that much.
hmm hmm
But they found a lot of sagas in that game, so and creating huge creatures which are and Saya was very relevant in that game. And in retrospect, I should have just check out if I really sideboarded in the Caracas. Yeah. And in retrospect, I should find a window earlier to just get the Caracas out of the deck.
hmm
And with that, I would have been able to prevent future activations of Embry
hmm
and also limit their options with Sai.
hmm
And the one turn where I played the Drew and activated the Elizabeth Shepherd to attack with a single Reclaimer instead. I probably should have used the Reclaimer because I already used the 5 mana for the Cradle
hmm
to get Caracas instead of attacking with it. And
Yeah, that
then
makes sense.
there would be a good chance that in 2 turns from that point, I would have been able to limit their options that much that they can't really. Because as you saw in this game, they created like 4 or 5 top dot tokens each turn,
hmm
and they drew multiple cards with Sai and with the Topters, and I even nuked their graveyard with the Bojuka Bog, exiling 17 cards,
hmm
and then they had like 10 cards in the graveyard the next turn again. So they had too much options, and with me getting the Caracas earlier, and also a good point for that with the activation of the reclaimers would be deck thinning, and that deck thinning is very important if we
hmm
need to find specific cards out of the deck to just win. And we just needed to get the payoff. Trade of Beamage, Zenith, Natural Order,
hmm
Wirewood Symbiote would be perfect draws from the top, but
Yeah, the Wirewood would be very good because of the Reclamation Sage on board, and we have the mana.
yeah. And probably if I continue to play the Reclamation Sage, probably from the future I would not sideboard out any of the Wirewood Symbiotes anymore
hmm
because the combination with the Reclamation Sage is that strong that you always want the additional copies of the wire with the meat.
Right.
And there's always a way to just trim like a random card, like the one visionary instead. So,
Mm-hmm.
but in the past we didn't really play it in Reclamation Sage, and then the cut of the one symbiote makes a lot of sense. But
Yeah,
this
I think
game,
in this matchup, Reclamation Sage is a little bit better because they don't have much removal, and their removal is the ones that they do have is already very stressed. So
yes,
we probably have a lot of mana, unlike some of the other Reclamation Sage matchups like D&T, where the mana is more constrained and it's actually very mana intensive.
yeah, it's totally correct. So,
I know.
Newton,
Oh,
how do
go
you
ahead.
like how do you like that we proceed to the quarterfinal?
Yeah, we can do that. I was just concerned because you said you had about an hour and a half, so I didn't want to take up too much of your time. But how are we doing on time with your side?
Oh yeah, I have a lot, not a lot of time, but a couple of minutes, I would say. I think
Okay, why don't we do this?
like 20 or 30 minutes is okay, but we can try to go over the next matches. So I think the quarterfinal and the final is very straightforward
Mhm.
with less decision trees, I would say. But this match was one of the most difficult games, at least, or the matches at all. So I wanted to show this match to the crowd as well.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I think the Delver matchup we see next is not that not much to discuss about. And the semifinals against the control player, which was the revanche I was getting from round two. So it could be interesting, but I would say the finals was straightforward. I would say that was
let,
not
let,
that taking that long. So I think if we have like 20 or 30 minutes, we should be okay for getting
yeah,
for all the replays.
I think let's do this. Let's because the semifinal is the one that is more interesting. Let's go. Let's do that one first, and if there's extra time, maybe we can do one of the other ones. But I think we want to prioritize the ones that are more interesting.
Yeah, okay, good idea. So we went straight ahead to the semifinals against the Jeskai Daybreacher. So here again we see a very aggressive use of the Force of Will. But this was the other player. So as you mentioned earlier, could be that would be a very common play pattern from now again. So the players are using their Force of Wills very early because they are expecting Elthro Shepherd to be very effective against us.
Mm-hmm.
So here I try to bait a Force with the Green Sun Zenith. So Green Sun Zenith for Christ is a must Force.
Right.
And then in the next turn, I can use the Natural Order for a lethal swing.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they disrupt somehow, I can get either Christ or Atraxa out of the Natural Order.
Mm-hmm.
And here they have 3 cards in hand and they don't play anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably they also have
Hull
Hull
Breacher
Breacher
probably.
in the hand
Yeah.
again. So they used Exiled Teferi and Narset. So there's a very high chance that they just have a Hull Breacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I decided to just go for it, to just fetch for the Dryad Arbor. Okay, it's very unlikely that they have uh, 3 Force of Wills with a pitch. Could be like Force of Negation, which they showed earlier, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, if they somehow disrupt here, then at least I don't get blown out with the Hull Breacher and with Days Undoing or something like that. So I think it's a no-brainer to just go for it here. And okay, we just see Thoughts to Plowshares with a trigger on the stack. So here I don't really be able to attack for lethal. So I'm 4 life short or 4 life short.
Mm-hmm.
So I think from this position, there's a very good chance that we got just get to the last points of the damage
Mm-hmm.
over the next turns. But somehow they got the chance to stabilize.
I think if it were me, yeah. I guess with this list, because there's no snuff out main deck, uh, it's probably okay to go for the hoof there, because 3 mana represents probably Hull Breacher, and you don't want to just randomly lose to the Days Undoing. So
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
And another possible play would be getting Atraxa.
Mm-hmm.
But Atraxa would somehow also lose, not lose, but would be bad if they have the removal. Like they had Swords to Plowshares there, and isn't necessary a win for me next turn. If they
Mm-hmm.
have Hullbreacher and Days Undoing,
Right.
they can still outplay the Atraxa over the next turns.
Mm-hmm.
So just put him on the test. Do they have the answer?
Mm-hmm.
If they have the answer with the removal spell, is it's not the end of the world. Okay, they still got like 12 damage, and
Mm-hmm.
they were at 4 life at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But here they just chained together multiple answers, multiple removal spells. Here is the Planeswalker, they just block it and they're going to 1 life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's still a good chance that they just can go to the finish line here with their 1 life. But now they just exiling the Dryad Arbor here. And now I have a prick from the top of the deck.
Yeah, I think from here it's probably gonna be hard to win.
Yeah. And they are also completing that with the Hull Breacher. So I assume they initially had the Hull Breacher
Mm-hmm.
at that point where I decided to go for the Hoof.
Mm-hmm.
Probably we don't see any Days of Undoing here, but um, yeah, in combination, they had Hull Breacher and Swords to Plowshares. It is clear that Atraxa wouldn't necessarily would have won, and I think it's totally correct to go for the hoof here. But the combination of cards they had was too good for that. So they chained multiple removal spells.
Mm-hmm.
Here we see an additional thematic ending. So uh, then here is the spot. Okay, if I somehow get to the point, now I have the natural order. If I somehow get to the point where I resolve Atraxa, I would still be able to win that game, but didn't find a sacrifice outlet in time. So it was very unfortunate because
Mm-hmm.
they lost, or I lost with their 1 life left,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah,
didn't really matter because I got my revenge. So
yeah,
anything to add to this point, Newt?
I think the only thing is, it was a very, I think, yeah, you could either go for the Atraxa there or you go for the lethal. I think, especially without the snuff outs, main in this version, um, I think your line is like perfectly reasonable. I think with the, with the artisan list, there might be merit to go for Atraxa there because at least snuff out answers the Hull Breacher if you draw into it with Atraxa. So that's the only thing I would add. Because
Yeah,
with Atraxa, I think in the other version, it's more likely to go the distance because of the chance to see the snuff out. Whereas here, it's a little bit dangerous because if they go Hull Breacher into Days of Doing, then we lose, right?
yeah, probably. Okay, let's jump to game 2, I would say. So,
I'm glad to see you won both post board games though.
pardon? Didn't really understand what you
Sorry,
said.
I said I was glad. I'm glad to see that you won games 2 and 3, like the two post board games.
Oh yeah, thank you. So yeah, the additional addition of the Priest made a lot of sense for the matchup. And now, as I knew from earlier that I could expect the aesthetic casters as well, I added the stuff outs from the sideboard as well to have more outs to that.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a bit easier for me because I knew what exactly I have to expect now.
Right.
So here, finding the cradle was very good to have more mana,
Hmm.
but I also had a lot of lands already. So here I could reserve the fetch lands again for the Dryad Arbor later.
Hmm.
And here I just add some creatures to the board and put them on the test. So they need answers and fast. And here in this game, we come to an interesting point later in regards to the use of my creatures, and they had dressed down
Hmm.
as well, but it was too late for them. So here I played the Wirewood Symbiote and wanted to draw some cards as long as I can because they are limited to 2 mana now, and next turn they could probably have either Narset or Narset wouldn't be really helping, but maybe Hullbreacher.
Hmm.
So just drawing a couple of cards. And then I had 2 mana left and activated the Elvish Reclaimer, throwing the Reclaimer, getting to more lands in the graveyard.
Hmm.
And here I see 3 mana open, and then I wanted to activate the Shepherd straight ahead to
Uh-huh.
play around the Static Caster,
Hmm.
because if they respond somehow by that, then I can just untap the Dryad Arbor and play out the Shepherd again, for example, if they use the Shepherd.
Hmm.
If they destroy the Shepherd, then I played the Static Caster, tried to kill the Shepherd, and I played it out again. And they just got like 14 damage in this situation.
I
I
think they
didn't really
might.
want it to add.
I think they probably misplayed too because it's interesting that they would main phase the static caster there.
Yeah, but it was because I used the Shepherd straight ahead in my main phase
Hmm.
because I knew if they had the Static Caster, they can just respond to the pump ability of the Shepherd,
Right.
but I am able to cast it out of the hand right away
Hmm.
without any loss of mana.
No, no.
So
What I mean by that is, I'm surprised they didn't do the static caster earlier instead of
yeah, okay, yeah, right. Maybe okay, that would probably indicate that they also have Force of Will in their hand, and they didn't want it to dive to a Nature Order. So
Mm.
in this case, it could make sense.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I would have been able to protect the Shepherd anyway. So the only really way they could have was just killing the Wirewood Symbiote.
Right.
But then they are really cold to a Natural Order. So sometimes it happens that the opponents just live with the point that they can't really kill the creature, but just prevent.
Hmm.
And here we see the dress down, but they only have 2 life left.
Hmm.
So I have 3 attackers, so there's not really a good chance for them to get out of the situation.
Hmm.
Maybe a Hail Mary brainstorm into Terminus or something like that. So here we see the straight power of the Elazar Shepherd. I'm really sure that they probably had Force of Will in their hand, which
Hmm.
makes totally sense because the style they played with the Static Caster.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was an easy game. And here we would still have been able to use Glimpse later. If something goes wrong, we could have rebuilt our board with the Glimpse. So it's a good tool to have. But here it looks like a bit useless. So then we go to game 3. So here I think very solid hand with a discard spell, find more things, card advantage engine going on in the next turns.
Mhm.
So could be interesting. So here I only be able to get Cradle or Wirewood Symbiote. Should have gone for the Cradle. Oh, no. I didn't. That's strange, but probably that was the reason because I want to stable got access to 3 mana
Mhm.
to be able to cast the Christ. So there is a world where, in combination with some removal spells and something like that,
Mhm.
with the Cradle, I wouldn't have been able to get the 3rd mana and the 3rd turn for sure. So. And also, this could be enabling future Triad hours. And the game usually takes long enough again in the matchup where I can also find another Cradle. So here, with the discard spells, we see 2 Prismatic Ending, Containment Priest, and Static Caster.
Mhm.
I think due to the nature of our hand, it's very clear which card we take.
Yeah, I think given what we have, you just take the static caster, right?
Yeah. So Containment Priest doesn't even matter that much for us because we could find a window to just, if they play it, we can just handle it with the Grist
Mhm.
and getting card advantage by that because they are forced to go for the Prismatic Ending after that.
Mhm.
Here we just draw cards. So um, they attack for 2, which doesn't matter. Then they played a cantrip. So also good because we know that
So.
yeah, that they don't have the Hull Breacher up here.
Mhm.
Um, okay, now that now it's unfortunate because if I would have gotten the Cradle earlier, then I could have gotten Shepherd into play and Christ right away,
Right.
handling the Containment Priest. So there's a lot of ifs, but I thought I can't really or the probability to lose the game is much lower if I am able to resolve or cast the Christ at all.
Mhm.
And I didn't want it to get to the point where I am short on mana
Mhm.
and getting multiple cradles early is not a good feeling.
Mhm.
And also with some of the removal spells, there would have been a world where I'm not really able to cast the Christ. But
Mhm.
here I just draw more cards.
Mhm.
Um, Another play would be just cast Christ and then use it right away,
Mhm.
either to destroy. We needed to destroy the Containment Priest, but this loses to sorts to plowshares or something like that, which
Right.
would have been bad. And they also have the opportunity to get to the 3rd way of mana, so they would have been able to exile the Christ if I just add a token.
Right.
So I just draw cards. And
Yeah.
here I don't even play the Shepherd because I didn't want it to give them good targets for the prismatic ending yet.
Right.
So there's a good chance that they maybe put one back with the brainstorm, but it's very likely that they have multiple of the endings in their hand now. And here I have to just be a bit patient. Um, okay, here now I play the Klims, also because I wanted to get the benefit out of the card as long as I can, because I knew they have Hull Breacher, they have Narset,
Mhm.
and drawing 2 cards in addition to add Grist to the board
I like
was
that.
very convenient for me to
Mhm.
do. I wasn't really that high on that, oh, I need to draw like 3 or 4 cards. Now unfortunately, we see the combination of Dress Down and Force of Will. Uh, so the Grist was countered, but at least I got an additional Green Sun Zenith, and with the second Grist out of the sideboard,
Oh,
Doesn't
this is
really matter
perfect.
that much.
This is perfect now because you have the Thoughtseize too.
Yeah. And they only have one card left.
Right.
So here there's a good chance if they have the Hull Breacher, I would be able to kill it with the Grist. Um, but they only cycle Shark Typhoon. Also because they actually don't have access to red is very um, good because I expect to get less blown out by any of the mass removal spells.
Hmm.
So here I have a good situation because I can create card advantage now with the Abyss Visionaries and I can get Christ, create a token. Suddenly, strangely, I milled two Wirewood Symbiote, so I got 3 tokens out of that. And here I can offer the trade for the Shark, or either offer the trade or even bounce one of the Visionaries would have been possible. Not really sure why I offered the trade for the Shark, but
Hmm.
didn't really matter that much.
No, you have the
So
Grizz on the
here
board
it's
already.
easy. Yeah. And here it's easy. So unfortunately, not enough mana to get Craterhoof Behemoth into play at this point, but I don't want to complain about the situation. The opponent has 0 cards in hand,
Right.
and I have this engine going with multiple card drawings per turn and with a Christ.
Not to mention
So
fully powered because of the cradle too.
yeah,
Actually,
producing like 4 or 5 mana per turn.
that
Pardon?
brings up my next question. Have you got a chance to hardcast Atraxa yet, or not yet?
Yeah, in testing games, I did cast it via Virtual Rangers, so
Hmm.
it's possible. You need a couple of elves to do that, and with the untap of the Wirewood Symbiote, it's not that difficult. But in this tournament, I didn't had the chance to do so.
No, I was curious only because of so I was only curious because in the artisan build, I think it may be a little bit easier because of the mana dorks, right? The noble hierarchs helps.
The
Uh,
Hyrax, yes. Hmm.
I'd be curious. I'm sure it can happen in this version too. I'd just be curious if you had come across it yet. Sounds like a few times in practice.
Yeah, you need a Bayou, and you need like
A
3 elves
cradle
to do
probably,
so.
and probably
A
a
cradle
cradle.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, a cradle for sure. And you need like three elves and like Wirewood Symbiote. Then you
Hmm.
should be able to just bounce your elves. You
Hmm.
convert the green mana into the colored mana with white and blue by the Virtual Ranger. Yeah, but it's more possible like the Progenitors. But it's still corner case, I would say, to cast it out of the hands. So here they play Days Undoing, and suddenly my board situation where I was so much ahead um, changed a bit, I would say. So here all of my payoffs are in my hand. So here I didn't really want to just slam the Greater Hoof because it just can be paused. So I needed to find a way
Hmm.
to somehow protect it. So starting first with the Once Upon a Time made sense to me to just find the Alazar Shepherd.
Right.
Um, the first Alazar Shepherd, then casting Glimpse, and then I could even try to get multiple Shepherds to make anything encounterable. And here we see an insane turn, I would say. So I get Elvish Visionary, then let it resolve. And then I cast the Visionary,
Hmm.
and now I draw like 8 or 9 cards with the
Hmm.
glimpse. So, oh, it was 8. It was 8 draws out of the glimpse.
Yeah, I'm
And then it's
assuming.
clear.
Oh, go ahead.
With so much draws that it's clear that you find a window to just get out of the situation and win in this turn.
Hmm.
Either with the Sword Seize to see that the coast is clear, or with the Alazar Shepherd. So
Yeah,
and there's Shepherd.
I was just gonna say I don't think your opponent's getting another turn, especially if you hit a cradle here.
Yeah. And even if we don't find a way to kill that, we should have be in a situation where we find more disruption, like with discard spells, or with other Sorrow Shepherd we can pump. Yeah, so here the card advantage engine is going on, and then there's the needed cradle. And the last card I was checking for was Mindbreak Trap.
That's
You
funny.
never know.
You never know. Yeah, that's true. I like that. Good fundamentals there.
Okay, so yeah, that was the revenge from the second round I lost against the Jeskai Daybreacher. And I think we can do it, the finals, we can do it in a short one because it was, yeah, a stompy matchup and I was straight ahead, getting to a good situation. Game 2 was very interesting. We can talk about that, but we can, I think we can go for the finals in a
Yeah,
uh,
I think we can go through this one pretty
good
quickly.
speed. Yes, exactly. So here I expect to play against Delver because Toseluk is a player from Italy. Luca is his name, if I remember correctly, and usually plays Delver. So here I wanted to play the Reclaimer for sure, to put it on the test. Yeah, just respond to that and answer it, and suddenly see Archon of Meria, which was very confusing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Yeah, and here we see, strangely, they play Chromox and pitched Solitude. Solitude could have gotten a better use, I would assume. You just can use Solitude to kill one of my creatures, but I wanted to get the initiative out of on the board. The Seasoned Dungeoneer. Uh, Not really sure which cards he has in his hand, but probably a lot of lands. So he would probably not been able to use the Solitude, or he needed to sacrifice the initiative creature here. And here we have the Shepherd, and you can use the Shepherd activation, get the initiative. They're at 10. And now we have a good situation. So even if they handle the Shepherd next turn, we can play the Hoof or
Uh,
get crazy with the 2 glimpses.
Also, good sequencing there for the audience. The reason why Jurg played the Bayou is in case there's another Archon of Memoria, so he has an untapped forest the following turn.
Yes. So it's very interesting play patterns from the last months. It was very important to go for the non-basic lands first, and then after that going for the basics. And the information the opponent has was not that really relevant at this point because I was straight ahead from the game. I would be able to win next turn anyway. So the information the opponent had about the second forest isn't that important. And yeah, being able to hardcast the Crater Hoof, even if they have the Archon, the second Archon in their hands, would have been mattering, maybe. But I also had a couple of elves here, which I could have produced mana with. But
I,
totally right.
I think this
Sequencing is
game was
important.
pretty nice in the sense that we had the Shepherd plus the Cradle to force a bad block from the opponent. I think that's what changed the game.
Yeah. And also being on the play would have mattering a lot, I was assuming, because yeah, there would have been a lot ahead on the damage race if they would have been on the play. But being able to get a creature into play and yeah, getting more mana with the Cradle, and this also shows how good Elizabeth Shepherd can be in a build like this, because the Spiritual Ranger wouldn't have been mattering at all. But as a 5/5, it's very very strong and very good to kill the opponent with. And here in game 2, we see a very interesting thing, which I think the deck, the Boros Regenerative deck, can be very potent in the future, and we have to be aware of because they have access to Magus of the Moon,
Yeah.
and this is a bit counterplaying to the play patterns of the Archon of Emeria, because with Archon of Emeria, usually you want like Bayou in your hand. You want access to stuff out. You want to play your non-basic lands first to not go or not to run into the Archon. And yeah, here I think we have a very solid hand. We can play Shepherd if they start with a Chalice. We have the only thing is we don't have removal. But as they're not able to play the White Plume Adventurer anymore, we know that they can't really be that fast with the initiative. So usually we have time until turn 2, I would say, and we not need to expect like a turn 1 initiative creature anymore, or at least not that consistent. And yeah, here we see just turn 1 Magus of the Moon, which is huge against elves. So I can tell of countless games, especially against Painter,
Uh-huh.
where you just be on the draw and you just don't have access to the one forest in your starting hand, and you just get blown out by the Magus of the Moon. It's the first play, and then with the follow-ups, it gets even harder. But here they probably trusted all in on the Magus of the Moon. And it's very good that they also have one of the forests in my hand.
Also, so this actually came up in my 5-0 on Friday night, where my red white initiative player was all in on the Magus as well, and I happened to have the one forest. I think this is one of the scenarios where I really like the Elvish Reclaimer too, right? Because you can get the second forest if needed. But good that you drew it here.
Exactly. And with the Once Upon a Time, I had even access to the second forest, so this card hurted them more than me, so we can say that. So here, starting with the Wirewood Symbiote to just protect any future creatures, especially from Fury.
I love that
Fury,
line, by the way, Yurg. In most cases, the natural instinct is to play the Reclaimer or the Reclaimer first. I really like that
yes,
you played the Wirewood first to protect it, because you know that the Reclaimer being turn 2 doesn't actually matter. So that's actually really heads up.
yeah. And the good thing is, unfortunate, we had access to Adraxa here, or we drew it again. So a lot of times we drew it in this event. And we already have access to 4 mana if we draw Natural Order from the top in the future. And I didn't really know if I have to expect like Fury, but it's very high common or chance that in a white and red deck list, they could have access to some of them. So I was playing a bit around Fury here, but the 2 damage of the Magus of the Moon doesn't really care. I can just take the damage and they play a second one. And here they don't have white mana, they only have red mana here. So
Uh-huh.
it's good for me because I know that hurts that much more to them than me. And here I go to 12. So if they follow up with the Seasoned Dungeoneer, could be a bit problematic. And here I don't decide to play more creatures to the board. I don't think that the second Shepherd gives that much because, as I explained, I tried a bit to play around like master removal things,
Yeah.
like Fury and so on. And Fury would have been not that impressive in this situation. I would say, okay, they get the 2-for-1 with the 2 Wirewood Symbiotes. And here there's a good trick to do. They're attacking and I can block with the Reclaimer. Then I sacrifice the Heath, getting the second Cradle. I would have been able to sacrifice one land first, for example, like Dryad Arbor, then bounce the Shepherd, untapping the Reclaimer, but I didn't want it to give him the window to play thing like a braid or uh, lightning bolt or whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I just didn't see the point where I need
Like
the
there's no
land
need.
because
Right.
we have enough lands anyway, and if we top deck the natural order, and also we are so much ahead here at that point because they only have the Magus of the Moon, and we have sorry, 2/3 which they will be forced to be used. And here you see they have multiple um, ancient tombs in play as well, so they are not really able to cast any future things after we attacked, and then we see the concession.
No,
It's a
that
crazy game
that was actually really.
because
Go ahead.
it's a crazy game because Magus of the Moon in turn one is most of the time it's so good against elves because it shuts down Gear's Cradle completely. We
Mm-hmm.
can't really use our black removal spells at all. And sometimes we even can't cast anything because we need at least one green mana. But if the opponent has the natural basic land in their hand and also finds an additional one with a once upon a time, then the plan doesn't really work always that much.
No, I think you played it really well, and something that I will forget from time to time is the Gaia's Cradle trick you did. Because I don't think about it too often, but I think that was a great example of how you can get free combat tricks in, right? Like with the Reclaimer, and then actually beat something like a 2/2 in combat with it. So that was pretty heads up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was also I noticed that myself that I was much more focused on the game and on things around what could the opponent have.
Mm-hmm.
So analyzing the situation,
Mm-hmm.
how does the game proceeds from here?
Mm-hmm.
What does he have in hand? What I have to do? Because I don't really see the point slamming in natural order against a Delver player with
Mm-hmm.
no threat in play. Okay, that was easy, but no threat in play, but 5 cards in hand. So
Right, right,
they
right.
didn't really do that much. So we have to assume they had at least maybe one or two Force of Wills, maybe.
Right.
So it was just wrong to just try to go for the
Mm-hmm.
natural order and then create a plan how to punish the opponent for having those cards in hand what they usually or currently have. So we saw that also in the Jeskai control game
Uh-huh.
in game 3. So we knew they have two prismatic ending, they have containment priest.
Mm-hmm.
None of the cards mattered against me because I had a good plan, because I have the opportunity to cast Elvish Visionary. They
Mm-hmm.
won't really cast any prismatic ending on a Elvish Visionary, and I also had the out against the Containment Priest already with the Christ. So if Christ resolves, I can just destroy the Containment Priest. So it's good to have a feeling for which cards the opponent has.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes discard spells even help you with that. So, and as I had a good break in the last weeks, so I was very fresh in my head, and it was very was easier for me to just focus on things
Mm-hmm.
and make the right plays, or sometimes make risky plays.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the times it went out very well, and my feeling for how was which cards the opponent has in his hand, uh, yeah, worked out very well in the event. So, and I think that's very important to have a good chance to get a couple of percentages out of the edge because the challenges are so difficult to play. There are so much good players,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, with the right play patterns and with the right decisions, you can get a lot of at least like 5 or 10% out of each match or each game to get an advantage and to um,
No, no, I
with a good
agree,
chance.
and I think regardless of the version you play, and we'll go into that a little bit if you want to change your screen to the deck list. But I think the major takeaway, if you want to, from Jurg's challenge win is he was in a couple of scenarios where he was forced to deviate from the main game plan and adapt it on the fly. And I think regardless of the version you play, the most important thing is to have a game plan and then adapt if necessary. So, for instance, I don't think you can just randomly cast cards and hope that's gonna win. Right? Maybe you can if you play something like I don't know, Upsaw spells or Belcher or whatever, right? But in general, you want to be able to have a game plan versus your specific matchup, and then go from there. So I think Jurg did that really well because we saw in the eight cast matchup he deviated from the collector oof, and then like how do I win from here, right? Or how do I lose from here? Same thing, right? He Jurg played against the initiative matchup right now where he led with Wirewood because in his mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, you don't think you can lose if you get to untap with a reclaimer there because your reclaimer will be a 3/4 and then block the Magus later on. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Uh, the resiliency of the reclaimer is very important. And this play pattern usually comes from the Moonstompy matchup. So an initiative matchup could be a bit different because they have Seasoned Dungeoneer, for example,
Mm-hmm.
or even the Chaos Adventurer, or how the card is called, the red initiative creature.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, and then we are not really that able to block with the Reclaimer. But I was thinking, yeah, that uh, protecting the Reclaimer is important. I don't want to give the opponent a good chance to use the removal spell in this point.
Mm-hmm.
Not really, I was not really sure if I have to expect any of the red removal spells out of the sideboard. So a braid or something, yeah, a braid, not lightning bolt, but a braid could be a very solid option for the opponent.
Right.
And I didn't want it to give him the opportunity to use the card,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why I led with the why I would symbiote first,
Right.
because it's not an attractive target for the opponent to cast the abrade. But the reclaimer would have been a good target because the opponent didn't knew that I also have the second forest in the hand.
Right.
So if they had the abrade or even a fury, they would have just killed the Elvish reclaimer right away.
Mm-hmm.
So it would not be the end of the world for me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Wild Symbiote didn't really matter for me at all. So protecting all my future elves by that made a lot of sense.
Uh-huh.
And also because I already had the Allosaurus Shepherd as well, I didn't really needed to play around Chalice or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
No.
this usually Average Reclaimer is the better start, that's for sure.
Right.
But in this situation, I didn't really feel the need because they were lower on resources at that point, and they spent a couple of resources to go for the Magus of the Moon,
Mm-hmm.
and they expect it to work. And it's a very high chance that they even kept a medium hand, just relying on the turn one Magus of the Moon.
Right.
And then they saw, okay, the
Mm-hmm.
card didn't really matter, and I
Mm-hmm.
had the opportunity to play more creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. You have to need to adapt the game plan sometimes on the fly, and it can help to get an advantage over the game to find a good
Yeah,
window to.
yeah, I like that example a lot because the reason being is because Wirewood turn one is historically a very bad start. Like that's kind of a weak start, and that's why I like that example even more because in this situation, I think that was pretty heads up. Um, if you have time, Jurg, I know we're already past how much you wanted to spend, but do you want to talk a little bit about going forward with the deck list, or do you have to head out?
Uh, yeah, I think like 5 minutes or so could be absolutely okay to talk about the next steps, I would say, or to further inclusions to get some value out of Atraxa.
Mm-hmm.
We had the discussion at the beginning of the recap already.
Mm-hmm.
So here I just can show you my list I was working on. It was on today. It's not very. Sometimes some cards are also missing because actually I don't own the cards.
Uh-huh.
But after yesterday, it could be not that problematic to get all those cards.
Mm-hmm.
So, and an idea, I had two ideas. I didn't really add the Ursa Saga to the list already.
Uh-huh.
Also because the card is expensive. Actually, I don't want to buy the card for the deck.
Right.
But one card which came to my mind to the deck was Dariga's Caldera again. So, we have a history about the card.
Big history. For those who don't know, you're top aided back to back challenges with that card and spiked the card like $100 or whatever it was for foils, and then we never played it again afterwards, which is pretty funny.
Yeah. Okay, that I have to admit that back at the time, one reason to play the card was because that was the time when Red Hot Arcanist was in the format,
Mm-hmm.
and we were Grist didn't even exist at that time, and
Right.
Clothes was a good card back then to fight opposing Eurodecks, and also it was okay against the Red Hot Arcanist because you would have been able to exile their ponders, for example, out of the graveyard and get life and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And also very useful with the card is you can just protect your GS Cradle
Mm-hmm.
from removal spell or something like Richard Port. And another thing what came to my mind, but you probably know that, it can also be useful with Boseiju if you are able to just bounce the Boseiju.
Mm-hmm.
Probably you play your Boseiju earlier, and then you can bounce it with Deriga's Caldera and use it as a removal spell. So that was an addition I was thinking about for the future versions, not necessarily on the Fiend Artisan version,
Mm-hmm.
but that could be a worthwhile addition. And as we are talking about Atraxa
Uh-huh.
earlier, I can also see maybe it's a bit narrow, but I can also see an addition of Sylvan Safekeeper into the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Not only because of Atraxa, but sometimes Sylvan Safekeeper it gets better after sideboarding because you have hate bears like Opposition Agent, you have hate bears like Black Engineer,
Yep.
and you're able to protect them with his Sylvan Safekeeper. There is not that much the opponent can do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they have removal, they have bounce spells. Okay, if they have mass removal or something like -1/-1 or something like that, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so be it. But it can protect Atraxa from things like removal or Caracas. And another idea I had when we were talking about earlier was to add cards like Tormod's Crypt to the deck,
Mm-hmm.
or at least to the sideboard, not to the main deck, but in the sideboard,
Mm-hmm.
because it can be a very good, or it could be a target we can add to the deck.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we are Atraxa, we play Atraxa with Natural Order, for example,
Mm-hmm.
then we can get multiple card types, and we don't really have any good targets for artifacts. And this one costs 0 mana, so we can just play it for free after we get it out of the Atraxa.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the problem is that there are not that much matchups for that
Right.
need. So we have to evaluate if it's really worth it and if we are keeping the Atraxa in the matchups where the comma script is probably needed. But
Right.
one matchups I would think about could be like Painter could be an option where you can bring in the Graveyard Hate. It's not that It's not that important, I would say, and we have another options there, but that could be an option where I can see the Thomas script. I can even see the Thomas script against Cephalid Breakfast if we decide to keep the natural order package against them.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be options to just get some free cards we can use after we get the Atraxa. For example, Snuff Out, for example, Tormod Script, for example, Fairy Macabre, that are
Mm-hmm.
all free cards we
Mm-hmm.
can get out of the Atraxa,
Mm-hmm.
and we get value out of that by getting free cards we can use additionally to the Atraxa on the battlefield.
No, that all makes sense. I think we had this discussion before that um, if you can diversify the card types, the Atraxa gets even better. The only thing is you want those cards to be good enough uh, on their own. So you don't want to play a card, you don't want to play Tarfire or along those lines just because it's a hit off Atraxa, right? Um, I mean, or I forget the exact one, but like maybe an on color tribal card, for instance. I don't think that's worth it. Or the incoming battles from the new set, but the one that I think is most interesting is, and that we started testing in the last 2 days, is in the artisan build, is with Urza Saga, and I think the fact that it can be got off Reclaimer as well is probably one of the more interesting deck building options going forward, and something that Jurg actually mentioned to me independently as well.
And they also are like enchantment creatures or enchantments in general.
Right.
Maybe a Miser's Sylvan Library could be an option to just improve the control matchups more,
Mm-hmm.
because it's okay. We are living in a prismatic ending world, so it could be that they are handling the Sylvan Library,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a good chance that if you get like 5 cards or 4 or 5 cards out of your Atraxa, then it's almost impossible to lose the game, I would say. And there are also some enchantment creatures. Uh, for example, Cursor of Krufix comes to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not, maybe it's not legacy playable at all, but
Mm-hmm.
um, if we are going to other colors again, we can also see things like Spirit of the Labyrinth and so on. So maybe we can diversify a bit. We have enough of flag slots in the Fiend Artisan build.
Mm-hmm.
You usually have a lot of flag slots anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of room to bring in cards uh, which have other card types as well to just get more value out of their Atraxa.
Mm-hmm.
But as you initially said, we shouldn't play really bad cards just to get cards like Artifact or Tribal out of that. But some of the cards are very useful, and um, yeah, that's a good idea to just add a couple of card types to the deck and to get more value out of Atraxa.
For sure. I think we're running, pretty late now. Jörg, do you want to say anything? I already posted your Twitter account for those who don't follow you. But anything you want to add before we sign off on this stream?
Uh, yeah, only one thing. So I think it's very good that that there are existing like 3 different elf decks in the legacy meta game. So there are also always some benefits and some disadvantages of each of the versions. The Nettle
Mm-hmm.
Sentinel version is the most explosive one. The Reclaimer version with Glimpse is sometimes explosive, but much more resilient
Mm-hmm.
than the Nettle Sentinel version. And the Fiend Artisan is the most resilient one, especially against red removal. So if there are a couple of different versions around and some of the versions are also successful, it
Mm-hmm.
could be very difficult for the opponents to find the right decisions
Mm-hmm.
on how they combat the different elf versions. For example, if they go ahead on End the Festivities, then I think in the right of the Fiend Artisan build, the card doesn't do anything because you can play 4 Reclaimer, 4 Endurance, 4 Fiend Artisan, and yeah, that doesn't really kill one of the creatures at all. Sure, they get the mana dogs, for example, but um, finding the right hate cards is very depending on the decks you are expecting in the metagame. And with the diversification of all the different elf variants, yeah, it's not that easy for the opponent to get the right choices. So
No, that's a good
that's
point.
one thing.
Oh yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to say, I want to thank you a lot, Newton, for all of your support and all of your help in the last months and years. So I'm very glad that we found a connection to each other. And yeah, I want to thank you a lot also from the whole community for all of the effort and all of the power you invest to Magic and Legacy, and especially to the Oops or Cradles and the Artisan builds. So very glad to be a part of that.
Thank you very much. That means a lot, Jurg. So Jurg and I have known each other for I want to say 3 years now, and then never met in person because we, COVID, and then we haven't. We live in different countries, but it's been a big pleasure to work with Jurg, and I would love to do more streams with him, but time zone differences have made it more difficult. Um, but I'm happy to see Jurg has come back at least temporarily from his break, and then immediately wins a challenge, and then definitely one of my favorite moments alongside Jurg was Eternal Weekend 2021, and then even last year seeing Jurg win, I think what is it, 8 challenges, not win, top eight challenges in a row, or 7 out of 8, uh, around the summertime, like July-ish last year. So that was really nice. And then also, for those who don't know, Jurg has had some of these big impacts on the deck in terms of innovation too, because, uh, for instance, he was the one that told me, "Oh, we don't need any more Korean Rangers. Like, who cares about the one copy? Like, we'll just live with it." And that decision was a big thing going into Eternal Weekend, and um, that's like for hints. Also, he helped me when I won the showcase qualifier in 2020, in saying that, well, we can ignore such and such deck because he has a pretty strong grasp of the metagame. So um, definitely happy to have formed this friendship over with Jurg over the years. Uh, Anything else you want to say, Jurg?
No, so I think we had a very good time today, and hopefully the chat is also very funny and happy with that. And thanks for having me. Would be very good if we can continue with that, but life is happening and we have to see uh, how we are able to do that in the future. But for today, I'm very happy to do that with you together. And
No, that sounds good. And then I know we ran over time here, Jurg, but I think without further ado, I'll go ahead and raid Parker. And thank you for joining us today. And then we'll sign off. And then it sounds good. Glad to have you on. Long overdue. And congratulations once again on your life changes, and well, more importantly, your life changes, but also the challenge win.
thanks, Newton. Means a lot to me.
So we will be joining Parker in a few seconds here.